My name is William Blackwood, and I've spent 36 years learning that life's cruelest jokes usually come wrapped in birthday paper. The morning of Dad's 70th birthday party started like any other Saturday in our New England town of East Haven. Catherine bustled around our kitchen, flour dusting her apron as she put finishing touches on what she claimed would be the most spectacular chocolate cake our family had ever seen. Her bakery downtown had been struggling lately, but my wife still possessed magic when it came to creating edible masterpieces. "William, did you remember to charge the camera batteries?" she asked, not looking up from her intricate frosting work. The morning light streaming through our kitchen windows caught the auburn highlights in her hair, reminding me why I'd fallen for her 8 years ago. "Already done," I replied, sipping my coffee and watching her work. "Elizabeth will be here by noon to help set up. Dad's excited about having the whole family together." Catherine paused in her decorating, a slight frown crossing her features. "I invited Derek to help with serving. You don't mind, do you? He's been such a good friend lately, especially with the bakery troubles." Derek Morrison, 38 years old, recently divorced and possessing the kind of gym-sculpted physique that made middle-aged women forget their wedding vows. He'd been circling Catherine's bakery for months, offering unsolicited business advice and lingering far too long over coffee purchases. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The more help, the better." But something in her tone bothered me. Catherine had been different lately. Distracted, secretive, always checking her phone with little smiles that never included me in their origin story. When I'd mentioned it, she'd blamed stress from the bakery's financial problems. My jewelry design business had been thriving, ironically. Apparently, economic uncertainty made people want to invest in precious metals and custom pieces. I'd offered to help with the bakery's expenses, but Catherine had declined, claiming she needed to handle it independently. The house phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "That'll be Elizabeth," Catherine said, wiping her hands on her apron. I answered to find my sister's familiar voice. "William, I'm bringing the folding chairs from my place. How's the birthday boy handling all the attention?" Elizabeth Blackwood had always been the practical one in our family. 2 years younger than me, she possessed an accountant's attention to detail and a detective's instinct for inconsistencies. If something seemed off, Elizabeth would notice. "Dad's in his element," I told her. "You know how he loves being the center of attention. Catherine's outdoing herself with the cake. And Derek's helping?" Elizabeth's tone carried a note I couldn't quite identify. "You know about that? Small town, William. People talk. Just keep your eyes open today, okay?" Before I could ask what she meant, the line went quiet. Elizabeth had always been protective, but this felt different. I found Catherine in our guest bedroom upstairs, smoothing fresh linens on the bed. The room looked pristine, almost too perfect, like a hotel suite waiting for inspection. "Expecting overnight guests?" I asked. She jumped slightly, then laughed. "Just want everything perfect for Dad's big day. You know how particular he gets about cleanliness." True enough. Robert Blackwood Sr. had spent 40 years as a construction foreman, and his standards for order remained military precise even in retirement. The new security system he'd insisted we install last month was supposedly for his peace of mind, though I suspected he enjoyed the technology aspect more than the safety features. "The cameras are working perfectly," I mentioned casually. "Dad was showing me the smartphone app yesterday. Amazing how clearly everything records." Catherine's hands stilled on the pillowcase for just a moment. "That's nice, dear. Very modern." By 11 o'clock, our house had transformed into party central. Elizabeth arrived with chairs and her usual arsenal of organizational supplies. Dad held court in his favorite armchair, regaling anyone within earshot with stories from his construction days. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends filled every available space, creating the kind of warm chaos that makes holidays memorable. Derek arrived precisely at noon, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing a smile that seemed calculated for maximum charm. He kissed Catherine's cheek in greeting, a gesture that lasted perhaps 2 seconds longer than friendship typically required. "William," Derek extended his hand with practiced enthusiasm. "Great to see you again. Catherine's told me so much about your jewelry work. Fascinating craft." "Thanks," I replied, noting how his eyes had already returned to my wife. "Appreciate you helping out today." The afternoon progressed smoothly. Derek proved himself useful, carrying trays and refilling drinks with the efficiency of someone eager to impress. He and Catherine worked together with an easy familiarity that might have seemed natural to casual observers. But I wasn't a casual observer anymore. I noticed how they stood just slightly too close when discussing serving arrangements. How Catherine's laugh became more musical when Derek made jokes. How their hands brushed when passing plates, and how neither seemed in any hurry to break contact. "William, you're brooding." Elizabeth appeared at my elbow, carrying 2 glasses of punch. "Just making sure everything runs smoothly." "Uh-huh." She followed my gaze across the room to where Catherine and Derek were arranging appetizers. "How long has this been going on?" "What do you mean?" Elizabeth gave me the look she'd perfected in childhood, the one that said she knew exactly when I was lying to myself. The way they're looking at each other, the way she lights up when he's around. "How long have you known?" I wanted to deny it, to claim she was imagining things. Instead, I found myself admitting, "I've had suspicions for a few weeks, nothing concrete." "Want some advice from your little sister?" "Do I have a choice?" "Trust your instincts and keep that security system handy." Before I could respond, Dad's voice boomed across the room. "Time for cake. Everyone gather round." Catherine's chocolate masterpiece took center stage on our dining room table, surrounded by 70 individual candles that cast dancing shadows across the assembled faces of 3 generations of Blackwoods. Dad beamed like a child, his weathered hands clasped together as the family launched into an enthusiastic rendition of "Happy Birthday." I stood behind the crowd, watching the scene unfold with growing unease. Catherine positioned herself directly across from Derek, their eyes meeting over the flickering candles with an intimacy that made my stomach clench. When she licked frosting from her finger, Derek's gaze followed the movement with obvious appreciation. "Make a wish, Grandpa!" shouted my cousin's 8-year-old daughter. Dad closed his eyes dramatically, then blew out the candles with surprising vigor for a 70-year-old. The room erupted in cheers and applause. "What did you wish for?" Elizabeth asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Dad replied with a wink. "But let's just say I hope this family keeps growing stronger." As we began cutting and serving cake, I noticed Catherine checking her phone frequently. Each glance was followed by a small smile, the kind reserved for private jokes or intimate messages. When Derek excused himself to use the bathroom, Catherine's phone buzzed almost immediately. She read the message and actually giggled. "Everything okay?" I asked, moving closer to my wife. "Just Angela from the bakery," Catherine replied quickly, sliding the phone into her pocket. "She's dealing with a difficult customer." Angela Rodriguez was Catherine's part-time employee, a grandmother in her 60s who barely knew how to send text messages, let alone craft anything worthy of giggles. The lie sat between us like a third person at the table. The party continued with the comfortable rhythm of family gatherings. Stories were shared, old photographs passed around, and Dad held court with tales of construction mishaps that grew more elaborate with each telling. Through it all, I found myself studying Catherine and Derek with forensic attention. They maintained careful distance in public, never standing together long enough to attract obvious attention. But I caught the subtle signals, the way Derek's fingers brushed Catherine's wrist when reaching for plates, how she angled her body toward him during conversations, the shared glances that lasted just moments too long. Around 4 o'clock, Catherine pressed her hand to her forehead and swayed slightly. "Oh," she murmured, loud enough for nearby relatives to notice. "I'm feeling dizzy." Elizabeth was beside her immediately. "What's wrong?" Just a sudden headache, Catherine said, her voice taking on the fragile quality she used when seeking sympathy. The excitement, maybe. I should lie down for a few minutes. Poor thing, Aunt Martha clucked. You've been working so hard on this party. Derek stepped forward with practiced concern. Can I help? Maybe bring you some water and aspirin? That's very thoughtful, Catherine replied, accepting his offered arm for support. I'll just rest in the guest room upstairs. Don't let me spoil Dad's celebration. I watched this performance with growing certainty. The timing was too convenient, Derek's offer too quick, Catherine's symptoms too perfectly timed for maximum sympathy without actual alarm. I can check on you, I offered. No, Catherine waved me away. Stay with your father. Derek can bring me what I need. Then I'll be fine. They disappeared upstairs together, Derek carrying a glass of water and bottle of aspirin like props in a carefully rehearsed play. The family barely noticed their absence, too engaged in Dad's stories and the steady flow of food and drinks. But Elizabeth noticed. She appeared at my side 15 minutes after Catherine and Derek had gone upstairs. Aspirin delivery shouldn't take this long, she said quietly. Maybe they're talking, I suggested, though my own patience was wearing thin. About what? Headache remedies? 20 minutes passed, then 30. I found myself checking my watch obsessively, each minute adding weight to the suspicion growing in my chest. Around me, the party continued its cheerful chaos, but I felt increasingly detached from the celebration. This is ridiculous, Elizabeth muttered. I'm going to check on her. She returned 5 minutes later, her face pale and expression grim. The door's locked, she whispered, pulling me into the kitchen where we could speak privately. I knocked and called Catherine's name. No answer. Maybe she's sleeping. Elizabeth's look could have frozen water. William, I heard sounds, and they weren't the sounds of someone suffering from a headache. The words hit me like physical blows. Hearing my suspicions confirmed by someone else made them real in a way that months of private doubt hadn't achieved. Are you certain? Unless headaches now cause rhythmic creaking and muffled conversations, yes, I'm certain. I leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling the solid wood beneath my palms as my world shifted on its axis. 8 years of marriage, reduced to a 40-minute betrayal in my father's house during his birthday celebration. What are you going to do? Elizabeth asked gently. I looked through the kitchen doorway at Dad, surrounded by family and glowing with happiness. This was supposed to be his day, his moment of celebration. Catherine and Derek had turned it into something else entirely. I'm going to handle this, I said finally. How? I pulled out my smartphone and opened the security system app Dad had been so proud to show me. The interface displayed camera feeds from every room in the house, including the guest bedroom. My finger hovered over the icon. Dad's security system records everything automatically, I said, even when people think they're being private. Elizabeth's eyes widened. You're going to watch? I'm going to gather evidence, then I'm going to decide what to do with it. The guest bedroom camera showed exactly what Elizabeth had described. Catherine and Derek engaged in activities that had nothing to do with headache relief. The timestamp showed they'd been occupied for 35 minutes, with no signs of concluding their private consultation. I saved the footage to my phone, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. Then I did something that would prove crucial later. I checked the system's settings and discovered that all recordings were automatically backed up to cloud storage. Even if someone deleted the local files, copies would remain. They're coming downstairs, Elizabeth warned, glancing toward the hallway. I pocketed my phone and composed my expression. Catherine appeared first, her hair slightly mussed and cheeks flushed in a way that had nothing to do with illness. Derek followed, carrying the empty water glass and unopened aspirin bottle. Feeling better? I asked my wife. Much better, Catherine replied, avoiding my eyes. Derek was so helpful. We talked about some business ideas for the bakery. Very productive. I'm sure it was. Derek handed me the aspirin bottle. She didn't need these after all. Sometimes just resting and talking through problems helps more than medicine. Absolutely, I agreed. Talking through problems can be very therapeutic. The party resumed its normal rhythm, but everything had changed for me. I moved through the remaining hours like an actor playing a role, smiling and laughing at appropriate moments while my mind worked through possibilities. Catherine and Derek maintained careful distance for the rest of the afternoon, but I caught them exchanging satisfied glances when they thought no one was watching. The performance continued, but I was no longer a willing audience member. As evening approached and relatives began gathering their things to leave, I made a decision that would change everything. "Before everyone goes," I announced, raising my voice to capture the room's attention, "I'd like to make a toast to Dad." The living room fell into expectant silence as I stood near the television, holding my wine glass aloft. Faces turned toward me with the patient attention families reserve for sentimental moments. Dad beamed from his armchair, clearly anticipating heartfelt words about his 7 decades of life. Catherine and Derek stood on opposite sides of the room now, maintaining the careful distance they'd established after their extended medical consultation upstairs. My wife's expression held mild curiosity mixed with the exhaustion that follows intense physical activity. Derek checked his watch, probably calculating how soon he could politely leave. 70 years, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. 7 decades of building things, creating a family, establishing traditions that bind us together. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled relatives. Aunt Martha wiped her eyes preemptively, always quick to emotional moments. "Dad taught me many things over the years," I continued, reaching into my pocket for my phone. "The value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and most significantly, the power of truth." I connected my phone to the television using the wireless display feature Dad had been so excited to learn about. The screen flickered to life, showing my phone's home screen. "Today has been full of surprises," I said, opening the security app. "Some expected, some not. But Dad always said that honesty is the foundation of family." Elizabeth, standing near the kitchen doorway, had gone very still. She understood what was about to happen. So, in the spirit of honesty, I raised my glass higher. Here's to truth, and to never being surprised by the people we trust most. I tapped the guest bedroom camera feed and selected the saved footage from earlier that afternoon. The television screen filled with high-definition clarity, showing Catherine and Derek in the guest bedroom, engaged in activities that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The timestamp clearly showed the duration of their encounter, and the audio captured conversations that had nothing to do with headache relief. The room erupted. Gasps echoed from multiple directions. Someone dropped a wine glass, the crash punctuating the shocked silence that followed the initial outburst. Aunt Martha's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror and fascination. Catherine screamed and ran toward the stairs, her face crimson with humiliation. Derek lunged for the television as if destroying the screen could somehow erase what everyone had witnessed. "Don't touch my equipment," Dad's voice cut through the chaos with surprising authority. "Leave it running." My cousins Mike and Tom, both construction workers like their grandfather, moved to block Derek's path to the door. Their expressions suggested they found the situation more entertaining than shocking. "Going somewhere?" Mike asked pleasantly. "We haven't cut the birthday cake yet." Derek's face had gone ashen. "This is insane! William, you can't just—" "Can't what?" I interrupted, my voice completely calm. "Can't show security footage from my own house? Can't share what happened during my father's birthday party? That's private." "Private?" I laughed, the sound carrying no humor whatsoever. "You made it private in my guest bedroom during my father's celebration, while my wife claimed to be ill. How exactly did you expect privacy to work in that scenario?" Dad struggled to his feet, his 70-year-old frame shaking with what I initially mistook for distress. Then I realized he was laughing. "Best birthday present ever," he declared, his voice carrying across the stunned room. 70 years old, and I finally get to see some real entertainment at my own party. "Dad," I started, concerned about his reaction. No, he waved me off, still chuckling. "This is perfect. Catherine always acted like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, and Derek here with his smooth talk about business opportunities. Now we know what kind of business he was really interested in." Elizabeth moved to stand beside me, her expression mixing pride with concern. "William, maybe we should what? Pretend this didn't happen? Go back to playing happy family while my wife conducts her extracurricular activities in our guest room?" The footage continued playing on the television, a continuous loop of betrayal broadcast in high definition. Several relatives had pulled out their phones, though whether to record the evidence or call for help remained unclear. Catherine's voice echoed from upstairs, muffled sobs punctuated by what sounded like frantic phone calls. Derek remained trapped in the living room, surrounded by family members whose expressions ranged from disgust to amusement. "Look," Derek tried again, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "This is between William and Catherine. The rest of you don't need to be involved." "Oh, but we are involved," Cousin Tom replied cheerfully. "This is family business now, and family business gets discussed thoroughly." "With documentation," Mike added, gesturing toward the television screen. I finally turned off the footage, though the damage was thoroughly complete. The silence that followed felt heavy with judgment and anticipation. "Catherine," I called toward the stairs, "come down here. We need to discuss some things." No response, except continued sobbing. "Catherine!" Dad's voice boomed with the authority that had commanded construction crews for decades. "Get down here now." Footsteps on the stairs preceded my wife's reluctant appearance. Her face was blotchy with tears, her hair disheveled, and her earlier confidence completely shattered. "I can explain," she began. "Please do," I replied. "Explain to everyone here how Derek's medical consultation lasted 43 minutes. Explain the business discussion that required removing your clothes. Explain how your sudden illness coincidentally occurred at the exact moment you needed privacy." Catherine's mouth opened and closed without producing words. The performance skills that had served her so well earlier seemed to have abandoned her completely. Derek stepped forward, attempting to salvage something from the wreckage. "William, Catherine, and we've developed feelings for each other. It wasn't planned." "Feelings," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We never meant for this to happen during your father's birthday." "But you meant for it to happen." Derek's silence provided all the confirmation needed. I looked around the room at the faces of my family, some shocked, some angry, some clearly enjoying the drama. These were people who had welcomed Catherine into their circle, who had celebrated our wedding, who had treated her as one of their own. "Well," I said finally, "I think that concludes the entertainment portion of Dad's party." "What happens now?" Elizabeth asked quietly. I looked at my wife, still standing on the stairs like an actress who had forgotten her lines. Then at Derek, trapped between my cousins and the door. Finally, at Dad, whose expression mixed disappointment with something that looked suspiciously like pride. "Now," I said, "we finish celebrating Dad's birthday. Some of us, anyway." The family began dispersing with the awkward efficiency of people fleeing a crime scene. Aunt Martha lingered long enough to whisper something supportive about knowing Catherine was trouble from the beginning, while cousins Mike and Tom made a show of helping Derek locate his coat and keys with exaggerated politeness. "Need help finding your way out?" Mike asked, his tone suggesting the help might be more forceful than Derek preferred. "I can manage," Derek replied, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Sure you can," Tom agreed, "just like you managed to help Catherine with her headache." Derek escaped through the front door without further comment, leaving behind the expensive wine he'd brought and any pretense of dignity. Through the window, I watched him hurry to his car with the hunched shoulders of a man expecting pursuit. Catherine remained on the stairs, her tears having evolved from dramatic sobs to genuine distress. The reality of public exposure was apparently more challenging than the thrill of secret romance. "Everyone knows now," she said finally. "Yes," I agreed. "They do. The whole town will hear about this by tomorrow." "Probably by tonight," Elizabeth corrected. "Aunt Martha has already made 3 phone calls." Dad settled back into his armchair, looking more energized than he had in months. "Best birthday party I've ever had," he declared. "Finally got some honest entertainment instead of boring small talk about weather and grandchildren." "Dad," I started, but he waved me off. "Don't apologize for showing backbone, son. I was wondering when you'd stop pretending everything was fine." Catherine descended the remaining stairs, her movements careful and defeated. "William, we need to talk privately. I think we've had enough privacy for one day. Please, I can explain everything." Elizabeth snorted. "What's to explain? We all saw the explanation on television." "You don't understand?" Catherine continued, her voice taking on the desperate quality of someone grasping for any available lifeline. "Derek and I, it's not what it looked like." "Really?" I pulled out my phone again. "Because I have 43 minutes of footage that suggests otherwise." "You can't use that against me. It's invasion of privacy." Dad laughed from his chair. "Privacy? In my house with my security system during my birthday party? That's not how privacy works, sweetheart." Catherine's face crumpled. "This will ruin everything. The bakery, my reputation, our marriage. You should have considered those consequences before conducting medical consultations in our guest bedroom." "It was just... we were just..." "Just what?" Elizabeth demanded. "Just accidentally removing your clothes? Just accidentally locking the door? Just accidentally spending 43 minutes discussing business opportunities?" Catherine had no answer that wouldn't make the situation worse. I looked at my wife, really looked at her for what felt like the first time in months. The woman I'd married 8 years ago had been vibrant and honest, full of dreams about building a life together. When had she become someone capable of such calculated deception? "How long?" I asked. "What?" "How long has this been going on with Derek?" Catherine's hesitation told me everything. "It's not... we haven't..." "The truth, Catherine. For once, just tell the truth." She collapsed onto the bottom stair, her remaining defenses crumbling. 3 months, maybe 4. 4 months. I repeated the words, testing how they felt. 4 months of lies. 4 months of working late at the bakery and business meetings and sudden headaches. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. It went far enough that you thought you could use my father's birthday party as cover for your affair. Dad made a disgusted sound. "That's the part that really gets me. My 70th birthday, and you two thought it was the perfect opportunity for your little rendezvous." "We didn't plan it," Catherine protested. "It just happened." "Nothing just happens," Elizabeth said coldly. "You made choices. Both of you made deliberate choices." I found myself thinking about the past 4 months with new clarity. Catherine's increased attention to her appearance, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in working longer hours at the struggling bakery. The signs had been there, but I'd chosen to trust rather than investigate. "What did you think would happen?" I asked. "Did you imagine you could continue this indefinitely?" Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I hoped, maybe you wouldn't find out. And if I had found out eventually? I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead." Clearly. The house felt different now, as if the revelation had changed its fundamental structure. Rooms where Catherine and I had shared meals and conversations now seemed contaminated by the knowledge of her deception. The guest bedroom upstairs would never feel the same. "I should pack some things," Catherine said quietly. "Probably a good idea. Where will I go?" I felt a flicker of the old protective instinct, quickly suppressed. "That's not my problem anymore." "William, please. Can't we work through this? People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" Dad's voice carried disbelief. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. This was a 4-month campaign of lies and betrayal." "It's over with Derek," Catherine said desperately. "I'll never see him again. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage." I looked at her sitting on the stairs, makeup smeared and dignity in ruins, and felt nothing but exhaustion. The anger would come later, along with the grief and the practical complications of divorce. Right now, I just wanted her gone. "Pack your things," I repeated. "We'll figure out the details later." Catherine nodded and climbed the stairs with the slow movements of someone much older than her 33 years. Her footsteps overhead marked the end of our marriage as clearly as any legal document. Elizabeth moved to stand beside my chair. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." Dad reached over and patted my shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You did the right thing, son. Took courage to expose the truth like that." "Did it? Or did I just humiliate myself in front of the entire family?" "You humiliated the people who deserved humiliation," Elizabeth corrected. "There's a difference." Through the ceiling, we could hear Catherine moving around the bedroom, opening drawers and closing suitcases. The sounds of a life being dismantled, one possession at a time. "What happens next?" I asked. "Next," Dad said firmly, "we finish my birthday cake. Then tomorrow, you start figuring out how to build a better life without people who lie to you." It seemed like reasonable advice from a man who'd just received the most memorable 70th birthday party in family history. Catherine descended the stairs 40 minutes later, carrying 2 suitcases and wearing the expression of someone attending their own funeral. The confident woman who decorated the birthday cake that morning had been replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger clutching the remnants of her former life. "I'll stay at my sister's place," she announced to no one in particular. "Good choice," Elizabeth replied without looking up from the leftover cake she was wrapping. "Jennifer always did enable your poor decisions." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "You want to discuss fairness? Let's talk about the fairness of conducting an affair during my father's birthday celebration. Let's discuss the fairness of 4 months of lies while I supported your failing bakery." Catherine flinched as if I'd struck her. "The bakery problems weren't my fault." "No, but using them as cover for your relationship with Derek certainly was." She set down her suitcases and made one final attempt at salvaging something from the wreckage. "William, I know you're hurt and angry. You have every right to be. But we've been together 8 years. Doesn't that count for something?" I studied her face, searching for any trace of the woman I'd married. 8 years should have counted for something. It should have counted enough to prevent you from betraying our marriage in my father's house. People make mistakes when they're unhappy. Were you unhappy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Yes, sometimes. The bakery stress, money problems, feeling like we were just going through the motions. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to work through your unhappiness with Derek. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Catherine? Explain it to me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Whatever explanation she'd prepared crumbled under direct examination. Dad spoke from his armchair, his voice carrying the weight of 7 decades of experience. "Catherine, I've seen a lot of marriages in my time. Good ones, bad ones, and everything in between. The good ones survive because people talk to each other when they're unhappy. The bad ones end because people like you decide that lying and cheating is easier than honest conversation. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Pressure? Elizabeth's voice rose dangerously. You want to talk about pressure? Try running a marriage while your spouse is conducting secret relationships behind your back. Try maintaining trust while being lied to every single day for 4 months. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did hurt people, I said quietly. You hurt me. You hurt Dad by using his celebration as cover for your affair, and you hurt yourself by destroying the life we'd built together. Catherine picked up her suitcases again, her movements mechanical and defeated. I'll contact you about the bakery and other arrangements. Through lawyers, I corrected. All future communication goes through lawyers. She nodded, tears starting fresh tracks down her cheeks. William, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry. I watched her struggle with the heavy suitcases and felt a brief flicker of the old instinct to help. Then I remembered the security footage and the flicker died. Sorry doesn't undo 4 months of deception, I said. Sorry doesn't erase what happened in our guest bedroom during Dad's birthday party. Catherine walked to the front door, then paused with her hand on the knob. What will you tell people? The truth. Everyone will know. Everyone already knows. You made sure of that when you decided to conduct your affair in a house equipped with security cameras. She left without another word, the door closing behind her with the finality of a coffin lid. Through the window, I watched her load the suitcases into her car with clumsy, grief-stricken movements. 8 years of marriage reduced to 2 pieces of luggage and a forwarding address. Well, Dad said after her car disappeared down the street, that's that. Elizabeth began cleaning up the remaining party debris with the efficient movements of someone processing shock through physical activity. How are you feeling? Empty, I admitted. Angry, relieved, confused, all at the same time. That's normal, Dad said. Betrayal does that to a person. Makes you question everything you thought you knew. I looked around the living room where my marriage had effectively ended just hours earlier. The television screen was dark now, but I could still see the ghost images of security footage that had changed everything. Did I handle it right? I asked. Exposing her like that in front of everyone? You handled it honestly, Elizabeth replied. Catherine made her choices in public, during a family celebration. She doesn't get to demand private consequences. Your sister's right, Dad agreed. Catherine and Derek thought they were clever, using my birthday as cover for their little game. They gambled that you wouldn't find out, and they lost. That's on them, not you. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the security app, looking at camera feeds from different rooms. The technology that had exposed my wife's betrayal now felt like both a blessing and a curse. I keep thinking about the timing, I said. She planned this. The sudden illness, Derek's offer to help, the locked door. They planned to use Dad's birthday party as their opportunity. That's the part that really bothers me, Elizabeth said. The calculation involved. The deliberate deception during what should have been a family celebration. Makes you wonder what else she planned, Dad mused. How many other lies, how many other deceptions you haven't discovered yet? The thought was sobering. If Catherine could orchestrate an affair during a family birthday party, what other betrayals might be hidden in the past 4 months? I need to change the locks, I realized suddenly. Good idea, Elizabeth agreed, and probably the security system access codes. And check the bank accounts, Dad added. Trust me on that one. The practical aspects of betrayal were beginning to sink in. Catherine wasn't just my unfaithful wife anymore. She was a potential security risk with access to my home, my finances, and my personal information. Tomorrow, I said. I'll handle all of that tomorrow. Tonight, Elizabeth corrected firmly. You're going to finish Dad's birthday cake and try to salvage something positive from this disaster. She was right. Despite everything that had happened, this was still Dad's 70th birthday. He deserved to end the day with celebration rather than recrimination. "You know what?" Dad said, struggling to his feet with renewed energy. "This really was my best birthday ever. 70 years old, and I finally got to see my son stand up for himself instead of letting people walk all over him. I should have done it sooner. Maybe. But you did it when it mattered most. That's what counts." We spent the next hour finishing the birthday cake and sharing stories that had nothing to do with betrayal or broken marriages. For brief moments, the house felt normal again, filled with family warmth instead of the echoes of shattered trust. But as the evening wound down and Elizabeth prepared to leave, the reality of my new situation began to settle in. I was alone in a house that had been designed for two people, facing the prospect of rebuilding a life that had been torn apart by someone I'd trusted completely. "You going to be okay tonight?" Elizabeth asked as she gathered her things. "I think so. Call if you need anything. Doesn't matter what time." After she left, Dad and I sat in comfortable silence, two men processing the aftermath of an extraordinary day. The house felt larger somehow, as if Catherine's departure had created physical space as well as emotional distance. "Any regrets?" Dad asked finally. I considered the question carefully. About exposing the affair? No. About the marriage ending? Yes. About trusting someone who didn't deserve it? Definitely. "That's honest," Dad said approvingly. "Honest is good. Honest is what's going to get you through this." As I helped him to his room and began turning off lights throughout the house, I reflected on the strange turns life can take. This morning, I'd been a married man preparing for a family celebration. Tonight, I was a single man dealing with the aftermath of public betrayal. But I was also a man who had finally stopped pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. That had to count for something. The guest bedroom door remained closed as I passed it on my way to the master bedroom. Tomorrow, I would strip the bed and pack away the security footage that had changed everything. Tonight, I would try to sleep in a house that felt both empty and strangely liberated. Dad had been right about one thing. It really had been an unforgettable 70th birthday party, just not in the way anyone had expected. 3 weeks later, I sat in my jewelry workshop, crafting a custom engagement ring for a young couple who still believed in forever. The irony wasn't lost on me, but the work provided focus and a sense of purpose that helped fill the empty spaces Catherine's departure had created. The divorce papers were filed, the locks were changed, and the security system had been updated with new access codes. Catherine's belongings had been collected by her sister Jennifer, who'd managed the entire transaction without making eye contact or offering explanations. Derek had apparently left town entirely, though rumors suggested his departure had more to do with his employer discovering the security footage than any sense of shame about the affair. Small towns have long memories for that kind of entertainment. Elizabeth stopped by most afternoons, ostensibly to check on Dad, but really to make sure I was handling the transition to single life without falling apart completely. Her presence was comforting without being overwhelming, and her practical advice about legal and financial matters proved invaluable. "Any word from Catherine?" she asked during one of these visits. "Through lawyers only," I replied, not looking up from the delicate metalwork that required my complete attention. "She wants half the value of the house and spousal support." "After conducting an affair in said house during Dad's birthday party?" "Apparently, adultery doesn't disqualify someone from financial claims in no-fault divorce states." Elizabeth made a disgusted sound. "The legal system needs work." "Maybe, but I'm not fighting it. I just want this finished." And I did. The anger had faded into something more like relief, as if Catherine's departure had removed a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The house felt peaceful now, filled with honest silence instead of the tension that had marked our final months together. Dad had recovered from his birthday excitement and settled back into his normal routine, though he still mentioned the party with obvious satisfaction whenever visitors came by. The story had become part of family legend, growing more elaborate with each telling. "Best entertainment we've had in years," he'd tell anyone willing to listen. "Better than cable television." The town's reaction had been predictably mixed. Some people expressed sympathy for my situation, others seemed to find the whole affair amusing, and a few suggested I should have handled things more privately. But the majority opinion seemed to be that Catherine and Derek had gotten exactly what they deserved. My jewelry business had actually benefited from the notoriety. Apparently, being the wronged husband in a public adultery scandal had given me a reputation for integrity that translated into increased customer trust. People wanted to buy engagement rings from someone who understood the value of commitment. As autumn settled over East Haven, I found myself looking forward rather than backward for the first time in months. The house was mine now, the business was thriving, and the future held possibilities that didn't include wondering what my spouse was really doing during those long afternoons at the bakery. Catherine's bakery had closed permanently 2 weeks after the birthday party, another casualty of small-town judgment and financial reality. I felt a brief moment of sadness for the dreams that had died with it, but not enough to regret my choices. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, too calculated to excuse, and too public to ignore. Catherine had made her decision when she chose to use my father's 70th birthday as cover for her affair. I had simply made sure the consequences matched the crime. The guest bedroom had been converted into a home office, the security footage deleted, and the memory of that afternoon relegated to the category of unpleasant but necessary education. Some lessons can only be learned through direct experience, and mine had been delivered in high-definition clarity on a 70-inch television screen. Life, I was discovering, had a way of continuing even after the foundations shifted. New foundations could be built, stronger and more honest than the ones that had crumbled. And sometimes, the best birthday gifts came wrapped in truth rather than pretty paper. Dad had been right about that, as he was about most things. Truth really did make the best foundation for family, and for everything else that mattered.